My sister was always a real dynamo, a go-getter. Always got things done. Didn't take any crap from anybody. Hard worker, great sense of humor, quick-witted, responsible. All of those things defined my sister. And prior to her cancer diagnosis, she had developed a couple of other health challenges. First, she developed rheumatoid arthritis, and it created crippling pain in her hands that made it hard for her to even hold a bottle of water. Crippling pain in her knees, which made it hard for her to walk. And around that same time, she also developed diabetes, and she had to take insulin shots every day. And then along came her cancer diagnosis, which meant that her life became a series of doctor's appointments and MRIs and ultrasounds and treatments and rinse and repeat. But through all of that, never a complaint. Never. My sister was just a warrior in that sense. For about a year after her diagnosis, those traits that I mentioned were still there. Like, she was still quick-witted, still very sharp, still very organized, still got things done. But not long after that, we started to notice changes in her. She started to become rebellious, and she started to become difficult. Her husband would have to stay on her just to take her pills, her cancer treatment pills, because oftentimes she wouldn't do it. She would neglect her dog, and her dog was like her child. Loved her dog. She would neglect her housework. I came home to visit on one occasion, and my sister spent the entire time just sitting on the couch, doing nothing. And her husband would try to encourage her, why don't you, go water the plants, because you physically can do that? Why don't you wash some dishes, because you physically can do that? Like, you should keep yourself active. And she would more or less disregard him and sit on the couch. I would get phone calls from my mother, expressing frustration because she would have to go to my sister's place at night to make sure she took her pills. On one occasion, at least one occasion that we know of, she didn't take them. And I would ask her about that, and she would just say, oh, I was tired. And I just couldn't fathom, how are you not taking your medication? I mean, we knew that her diagnosis wasn't great, even with all of her treatments. But it goes without saying, if you don't take your treatment, the end result, everybody knows what it's going to be. It was unfathomable to me that she just wouldn't do that. And so we got very frustrated with her. And I'm almost ashamed to admit it now, but I told my mother at one point, if she's giving up, I'm not going to look at her the same way, because the Sheri that I knew would never give up, ever. Her husband once said to me, because he, would sometimes have to raise his voice at her and yell at her because he would ask her 100 times to do something and she wouldn't do it. He said to me, it'd be like your son. It'd be like you telling your son 100 times, don't go to the end of the dock by the riverfront. And if you say to him 100 times, maybe, eventually your voice is going to start to rise up until you're yelling at him. And that was basically the situation that he was in. So he was very frustrated, and I was getting frustrated. My mother was getting frustrated, and we were questioning my sister's will and whether or not she was giving up. But then we started to notice some very obvious changes to her cognitive ability. I would come to visit, and she, mid-sentence, would just forget what she was going to say. It happened quite a bit. Then I found out from her husband that she hadn't been taking care of the household bills, which was always her responsibility. She handled all of the online banking for them, and it was something that he just, hadn't ever had to learn how to do. One day he checked their joint email account, and they had all of these outstanding bills going back a couple of months that she just hadn't paid. And that was just not like her at all. Again, she was always the organized one. If anything, she paid her bills early. And so for them not to be paid for a couple of months, it wasn't like her. Then we found out that a rental property that I have back home that my sister and my brother-in-law managed for me, there were thousands and thousands of dollars worth of email money transfers from renters that were pending in their email account that she never deposited. And again, she would never do that, ever. To me, the most concerning point came around the end of June when she forgot my mother's birthday. I called her and said, hey, did you get Mom anything for her birthday? This was about a week before. And all I got was a one-word answer. She said, nope. And I had planned to get my mother, a big bouquet of flowers and, teddy bears and balloons and chocolates, the whole thing. And so I said to my sister, do you want me to put your name on the gift that I got, Mom? And Sheri just said, yep. One-word answer. Wasn't like her at all. In my entire life, she had never missed somebody's birthday close to her, especially my mother's. And that's when I knew that there was a problem. As we came to find out, the tumors had really pressed on certain areas of her brain and were causing issues to her when it came to emotion, her ability to display emotion. And we had noticed that she had become just very straight-faced and didn't joke around and didn't really talk a whole lot. So that kind of explained that. We found out that tumors were pressing on certain areas of her brain that impacted her ability to think and her cognitive. And again, everything made sense. And I can tell you that my brother-in-law carried around a lot of guilt, and maybe he still does, but he carried around a lot of guilt because he would get so frustrated with her and he would get angry at her, asking her to do something 100 times, asking her to take her medication, and she would never do it. And here he thought she was just being rebellious and difficult. But we came to realize that it might have been a case where she just couldn't help it. She just didn't realize and wasn't trying intentionally to be difficult. She just couldn't help it. And so he's been carrying around, or at least was carrying around, a lot of guilt about that and about how he treated her, even though I don't think it was his fault at all. Obviously, he had a lot of compounding frustration with the whole situation himself, and having to tell somebody time and time again to take their medication and having them disregard you. I can understand how that would get somebody frustrated. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if you have someone close to you who is old or who is sick, especially if they're terminal, be understanding. Be understanding of the fact that things that they say, things that they do, they may not necessarily mean to do those things. And that brings me to a similar but different topic about awareness. I think sometimes people close to us who, again, are sick or old, we might not realize that they are as aware as they are. And I'll tell you a couple of personal stories to explain my point. The last night that my father was alive, he was in his room. We were all there. We were all visiting with him. We were playing his favorite music and playing, some of his favorite TV shows. And I was showing him raw footage from the documentary that I was producing at the time, so he could hear what people close to him had to say about him. And the whole time, he either would be sleeping, or if he was awake, he wouldn't say anything. He didn't display any emotion. If you spoke to him, he would mostly just nod his head or not react at all. And that's how he was. And so, we just basically kind of sat around and just kind of talked to him a little bit, played music. There wasn't any great conversation happening. Late into the night, I hadn't had anything to eat. I hadn't had anything to drink. And my dad had meal replacement shakes in his refrigerator, Ensure, they're called. So I happened to say out loud, I'm thirsty. I think I'm going to grab an Ensure. And my father, who, again, had spent the whole day either sleeping or just not showing any emotion, not talking, not really responding to anybody, out of nowhere, he spoke up and he said, "Me too." And that caught me by surprise a little bit, you know? And so I went and I got him a shake and I opened it for him and gave him some, and he drank a little bit. But that kind of showed me that he was aware, he was listening, you know? Even though we weren't getting emotion or reaction out of him, he was listening. Fast forward, and my sister, a few days before she passed, we were all at her house, and she was mostly sleeping on the couch. Her cognitive ability was had deteriorated a lot by that point because of what she was dealing with. And so if she wasn't sleeping, she would gaze at you, and, you know, you would wonder if she even recognized who you were at that point. She wouldn't talk. You might get her to nod her head. That was about it. A family friend was over, and my brother-in-law was talking to them about my sister's prognosis. He was kind of sitting behind my sister, and from where I was sitting, I could see her face, and he couldn't. As he's talking about her prognosis, he said, the doctor has told us that she has days to weeks, he said. And when he said that, my sister's expression immediately changed, and she got very emotional. And, you know, she looked like she wanted to cry. And I saw that, and that had not been the first time that my brother-in-law had spoken to friends or family in front of my sister about her prognosis. And so when the night ended, you know, there was always people around. I could not talk to my brother-in-law one-on-one. My sister obviously was always there too. So I sent him a text message when I left, and I told him about her reaction when he was talking about her prognosis. And I said to him, no more talking about her prognosis in front of her, no more speaking negatively in any way in front of her. And I know that he meant no harm, and I was not trying to criticize him. I just wanted to let him know how she reacted at that moment. And again, it goes to show that sometimes people are more aware than you might think that they are. And so, you know, again, if you have somebody who's old or who is sick, and even if you don't, you know, think that they might be listening, or if they're being rebellious, be understanding, and be aware that they might be aware.